For 17 years, my wife handed me a coffee mug instead of divorce documents in the morning. "No need for divorce papers," she said, smirking as if she'd won a secret game. "Leave." In the doorway of our home, which I had paid off 2 years early, stood a man with a duffel bag, entering my bedroom as if it were his own closet. I didn't resist, didn't shout. I simply nodded, climbed upstairs, and began packing. What Camille wasn't aware of, what she couldn't possibly know, was that I was more than just her husband. When her phone rang the next day with a code from Washington, D.C., she was about to learn who she had instructed to depart. "My name is Donovan Marsh. I am 46 years old, and for the past 19 years, I've held a job that isn't officially documented in the way most jobs are. On my driver's license, tax documents, medical forms at the pediatrician's office, I'm identified as a logistics consultant for a firm in Norfolk, Virginia, specializing in shipping compliance. Technically, this isn't false. It's a front, a solid one, essential for hiding my true profession at social events like dinner parties and PTA meetings, or from any curious neighbor who has ever asked about my job. The fact is, I have spent almost 2 decades working with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Most of that time was dedicated to financial crimes and counterintelligence, a role which necessitated remaining concealed for all intents and purposes. Even my own wife was unaware of the full extent of it. This was by design, part of the job description. However, let me clarify matters. I am not rushing ahead, and if there's one lesson I've learned from 18 years in federal law enforcement, it's the value of patience. Now, let me explain how a man constructs a life for 17 years, only to see his wife give it away to another man like a simple set of house keys. Camille and I crossed paths in Richmond, Virginia, when I was 27, employed in what she perceived as a beginning compliance role for a maritime transport corporation. She, aged 25, was completing her interior design degree at VCU and worked part-time at a boutique furniture store on West Broad Street. Her laugh was infectious, capable of lighting up a room and causing strangers to turn and grin without knowing the reason. I entered that furniture shop in search of a bookshelf and left 3 weeks later proposing dinner. This is the brief account. The detailed tale includes my deception about my true job duties for the initial 6 months we dated, which seems unfavorable until you grasp that undercover federal agents performing work adjacent to their duties must maintain their disguise, even in their private lives, particularly during the early stages when a relationship might jeopardize an ongoing operation. 3 months prior to my proposal, she had fallen in love with a fictionalized version of me. When I eventually confessed my true actions within my apartment on Hull Street, she wept, not from fear but relief. She later explained that she always suspected there was something I concealed, which she thought suggested I didn't trust her. I chose to reveal the truth that night because I desired to marry her, and one does not enter a marriage with lies about the essential structure of one's life. She maintained the secret due to necessity. Just like agents in confidential roles, spouses sign non-disclosure agreements, and Camille complied promptly, sitting opposite my then supervisor, Deborah Castellano, a strict yet just woman who clearly outlined the penalties if she breached her silence. 17 years ago, on a Saturday in October, we exchanged vows at a quaint vineyard near Charlottesville. My mother, who'd always emphasized the value of a man's promise, tearfully witnessed the ceremony. My former Marine father, who instilled the idea that a man's word is genuinely valuable, congratulated me afterward, affirming I had done well. The Ashfords, Camille's parents who ran an accounting firm in Fredericksburg, offered a toast to our longevity, which resonated deeply with me then and still does now. However, I didn't realize that Camille wouldn't be the partner sharing the journey for the entire span. Initially, everything seemed picture-perfect from the outside. We settled in a colonial home in a peaceful suburban area close to her parents for their occasional unannounced visits. We welcomed 2 children. For the first decade, life unfolded as expected. We lived in our house within reach of Camille's parents, and our family grew with the arrival of our kids. 15-year-old Harper is our daughter, shrewd and skilled in varsity volleyball, while remaining oblivious to the nature of her father's employment, which would intimidate many grown-ups. Our son Beckett, aged 12, exhibits an extreme fascination with assembling computers from eBay acquisitions, asking more questions during a single dinner conversation than what a typical federal interrogator might ask in a week. For 4 sports seasons, I managed Beckett's Little League team and accompanied Harper to volleyball tournaments across multiple states. Outwardly, I appeared as an unremarkable suburban father with frequent work travels. Those trips, however, constituted the essence of my job. Spending weeks in Miami to trace financial connections linked to criminal organizations, collaborating for months with a joint task force probing shell companies and money laundering through real estate, and spending 6 consecutive months in cities whose specifics I still cannot disclose. Over a prolonged period, a case resulted in 14 federal indictments for me. During this time, Camille was aware of my profession without being privy to its specifics, and our understanding sustained us for over a decade. She comprehended that I would be unreachable on certain nights and evasive about some trips, knowing they were related to work. She recognized the silences in our marriage as symbols of trust rather than emptiness. However, in retrospect, I can pinpoint the particular season when things began to alter. Although at the time, engrossed by a case from Baltimore, I failed to detect the emerging fissures beneath my own roof. This change transpired approximately 2 years ago, coinciding with Camille's new position as a regional sales director for Bellwether Interiors, a home staging and design company. Her job required her to enter other people's homes and lives, eventually drawing her into the sphere of a man named Trent Kowalski, though I was unaware of this at the time. Trent, aged 34, ran his self-owned real estate investment business from an office in Stafford County, exuding the relaxed air of success born from unquestioned presence. His black lifted F-150 with perpetually renewed dealer plates was a testament to his prosperity, a declaration for all to see. I came to know Trent through Camille's involvement in staging a property he was renovating in Spotsylvania County. Upon reflection, it became evident that the warning signs, while familiar as recurring themes, had initially seemed implausible. Camille began frequenting a boutique spin studio 25 minutes from our home, despite a suitable gym just 8 minutes away. At her open houses, she altered her attire, not drastically, but enough to prompt Denise, her mother, to comment during a family gathering. She began leaving her phone face down on the kitchen counter, a habit shift for someone who had never locked it for 15 years prior. I couldn't help but notice this change. After all, I spent 20 years in federal investigative work, and my keen eyes don't turn off when I step into my own home. However, what people may find surprising about my approach is that I didn't immediately address the change, and it wasn't due to denial. Instead, I knew more than most that revealing your hand in an investigation could blur your perspective, preventing you from seeing the entire picture. A cautious part of me, honed by 2 decades of building cases, handled my marriage with the same meticulousness as a target. I observed, I collected data, I waited. For 4 months, I constructed a comprehensive image, and it's essential I share something candid with you. Those solitary 4 months surpassed the loneliness of any undercover mission or absence from my children for half a year. This is because, during those 4 months, I continued to prepare her coffee each morning, bid her farewell, and engage in dinner conversations about her day, hearing tales of clients and staging ventures that I later discovered, after discreetly glancing at her business schedule during a weekend when the kids were with my parents, were only partially truthful at best. The validation arrived on a March Tuesday. I had informed Camille I was traveling to Atlanta for a 3-day consulting trip, which, interestingly enough, was indeed accurate given that I was wrapping up a financial crimes case consuming most of the year. Unknown to Camille, my return flight arrived 6 hours ahead of the time I had informed her, a habitual operational practice from my previous job that I unconsciously carried over. Ancient instincts. Avoid disclosing actual arrival times unless necessary. Arriving at our driveway in Fredericksburg around 2 p.m., I noticed Trent Kowalski's black F-150 parked in the garage in my spot, while Camille's Lexus was partially on the lawn, suggesting she had left hastily without considering parking. I remained in my car for a prolonged period, just as I would outside numerous surveillance targets over the years, and a peculiar clinical composure washed over me. Not anger yet. Just the same unwavering attention I direct at any confirmed threat. I didn't enter our house that day. I wish to clarify this, as some may question why a man wouldn't immediately enter his own home under such circumstances. I've come to realize throughout my career that it's unwise to act impulsively based on emotions without fully comprehending the situation at hand. Therefore, after confirming something, I withdrew from our driveway and headed to a coffee shop on Caroline Street, where I stayed for 2 hours engaging in an action I'm not proud of but can't completely regret. I embarked on compiling a personal dossier about my own spouse. During the subsequent 6 weeks, I utilized skills from my profession. I gathered financial records. Given my marital status, I had every legal right to access them. I uncovered charges at a Stafford boutique hotel. These appeared on 4 separate weekends over a 5-month period. Each time, they were booked under Camille's name and paid using a credit card I wasn't aware of because she'd obtained it 8 months prior, and had the statements sent to a Bellwether Interior P.O. Box address, thinking it was smart. It wasn't. Uncovered Trent Kowalski's comprehensive financial and business background, which subsequently unveiled a fact that Camille remained oblivious about. Trent's real estate investment firm, the one financing his lifestyle and confidence, was under active scrutiny by the Virginia State Corporation Commission for suspected involvement in a typical real estate scam, manipulating property appraisals fraudulently, utilizing straw buyers to inflate loan values, then defaulting and pocketing the difference. Though smaller in scale compared to cases I'd dealt with previously, it was authentic, and it had enough federal connections that I alerted a colleague at the Richmond field office as a professional courtesy, without disclosing how I knew Trent Kowalski initially. I didn't reveal this information to Camille. I continued coaching Beckett's baseball games. I persisted in driving Harper to tournaments. For 2 decades, I honed the art of composure while co-sleeping with a woman who, on certain nights, clandestinely communicated with another man just a few feet away from me, feigning absorption in my laptop's case files. Inquisitive minds wonder how such stoicism is maintained amid the unspoken demise of a marriage. The truth is, my composure was the only talent I meticulously developed. Despite the raw emotions coursing through me, I never allowed them to dictate my subsequent actions. The day it all shattered wasn't of my choosing. It was Camille's decision, and I believe that aspect holds significance because it reveals her transformation over those months. It was a Thursday. As usual, I was preparing coffee in the kitchen. A ritual followed for 17 years, when Camille descended before 7 in the morning, fully dressed, coiffed, and made up, on a day she had no scheduled open houses. Trent Kowalski followed Camille, lugging a duffel bag, seemingly as familiar with my entryway as if he'd traversed it 100 times. Later, I discover this was indeed the case. "Donovan," Camille stated, her voice steady without an ounce of the apprehension I might have assumed from a woman on the verge of shattering her family. I sensed a forthcoming honesty. So I set down my coffee mug and listened, giving her the floor to speak first, allowing her to disclose what she believed was true. "I've been seeing Trent for some time," she revealed, subtly gesturing towards him, much like presenting a work acquaintance, "and I want a divorce." Upon hearing this, I felt my chest constrict, though I responded with a simple, "All right." This simple word appeared to unnerve her more than anticipated. She had meticulously prepared for tears, fury, my collapse before her and her new partner, yet she encountered a man who had been mourning our marriage for 4 months, which she believed was only ending at that moment. "No divorce papers required," she said then, and this remark has remained etched in my memory since, a memory I will carry until my death due to the smug smile she flashed when she made it. It wasn't an anxious smile, but a self-assured one. "Just depart, Donovan. This is now my home." I glanced at Trent, standing in my hallway with his duffel bag as if he was moving into a dorm room, and I looked at Camille, standing in the kitchen we had renovated 5 years ago, the kitchen where I taught Beckett to make pancakes, the kitchen where Harper completed her homework every night since kindergarten, and I agreed, "All right." Then I ascended the stairs, packed 2 suitcases with the same meticulous precision as a field assignment, and left. I didn't engage in a dispute regarding the house. I didn't argue about anything at all. In Camille's expression as I departed through the front door, I observed that my silence unnerved her more than any shouting ever could. Those prepared for a quarrel are taken aback when the conflict doesn't materialize. I climbed into my vehicle, navigated to a Hampton Inn off Route 3, secured a room, and remained on the bed's edge for quite some time. However, Camille failed to grasp this point, a reality that neither her true crime show marathons nor divorce form reading had prepared her for. She had instructed a federal agent to vacate his residence without resistance, yet she was clueless that the man she'd just publicly disgraced in front of her boyfriend had spent 6 weeks meticulously gathering evidence on precisely the same boyfriend, which was about to shatter his entire existence. That night, from my hotel room, I initiated 2 telephone conversations. Initially, I contacted my lawyer Priscilla Vance, a seasoned professional handling estate and family matters for federal employees for over a decade, whom I had hired discreetly 2 months prior, around the time I became aware of my affair. Subsequently, I reached out to my longtime colleague Reginald Ockaffer, currently working on white-collar crimes at the Richmond field office, with whom I'd shared the name Trent Kowalski a few weeks back without disclosing our personal link. "Reggie," I said upon answering, "the case concerning Kowalski, where does it stand?" A moment of silence followed, signaling that Reggie may have already suspected my inquiry was not purely professional. "It's quite interesting," he responded. "We've been developing it for roughly 2 months now. The state has been examining him for appraisal fraud, but upon further scrutiny, it appears the transgressions extend beyond that. There's evidence of wire fraud spanning across state lines, with at least 3 confirmed victims. Likely there are more. We had intended to act against him in the coming weeks regardless." I shared my history with Camille and Trent, not because the investigation necessitated it, but because 19 years of training taught me that failing to disclose a potential conflict of interest to a colleague working on a case linked to my personal life could lead to termination and dismissed cases. Reggie listened attentively without interruption, then said, "Donovan, I'm sorry, that's tough." After a brief pause, he added, "You understand this doesn't alter the investigation's timeline. We were already planning to move against him." I responded, "I know, I'm not suggesting any changes, I just wanted you to know. You're being informed due to necessity and assurance that our circumstances shouldn't seem like I leveraged my position against your partner who was involved with my wife." Reggie chuckled, not cruelly. "To clarify, the individual would have faced indictment regardless of your presence. Coincidentally, you became part of an ongoing federal case right after marrying into it. Remarkably, this part of the narrative is hard to accept even for me, despite experiencing every moment of it. Trent Kowalski wasn't merely a personal trainer or gym enthusiast who won my wife over with a good truck and a self-assured grin. In truth, he was, unbeknownst to Camille, the focus of an active multi-state wire fraud investigation that had been in progress for months before he stepped into my home. For 17 years, Camille had nurtured feelings for a man who, as per legal standards, was entangled in federal investigations, unbeknownst to her. Trent, who claimed to be a self-made successful investor and a divorcee, had spun an identical facade for her. In reality, Trent had never been married, a fact Camille would discover too late. That night in the Hampton Inn, I allowed myself something I hadn't done since confirming everything. I acknowledged my feelings. Not anger, not yet, but sorrow. It takes a long time to construct something substantial with someone. And despite knowing what I knew, despite preparing for this ending for weeks, there is a unique emptiness that arises from witnessing someone you loved for the majority of your adult life exude joy while instructing you to vacate your own home. That night, I phoned my retired Marine father discussing the recent event. He was typically taciturn but imparted a phrase that resonated with me. "A man who readies for the tempest doesn't perish within it. He merely stays damp for a while." It's as close to poetry as he ever ventures, and it came at just the right moment. The following morning, a Friday, I visited Harper and Beckett's school before first period, an uncommon practice for me. I spent 10 minutes with each of them individually in the conference room provided by the guidance counselor. I explained to them, as tenderly and truthfully as possible, that their mother and I were separating, and that my affection for them would not waver no matter what transpired next. Harper shed tears. Beckett posed a series of pragmatic questions at 12 years old about where he'd sleep and whether he'd retain his computer setup, which inexplicably brought on a laugh, my first in weeks. I informed them that I had discovered a nearby rental property, which by then I indeed had a 2-bedroom dwelling approximately 15 minutes from their school. Regardless of other events unfolding, I made it clear that I wouldn't be one of those absentee fathers in my children's daily lives. On that Friday afternoon, as I was finalizing the rental agreement, Priscilla Vance phoned with news. "I've submitted the initial paperwork," she stated. "Given your financial disclosures and what you've shared about the property, I believe your case is stronger than Camille realizes." The house held more significance than Camille appreciated, as it was 3 years ago when interest rates dropped that I utilized a small inheritance from my grandmother to completely pay off our mortgage balance, an aspect of which Camille was present, but seemingly overlooked the legal repercussions. In accordance with Virginia law, and considering the unique setup of the property and repayment scheme, as well as an earlier postnuptial financial agreement we had signed when Camille was keen on safeguarding our separate assets due to her experience witnessing her parents' business dispute. The house wasn't as straightforwardly hers as she assumed in that kitchen. However, the house itself was just a minor detail compared to what transpired subsequently. On Saturday morning, barely 48 hours after Camille asked me to leave, I found myself at my new rental sipping coffee from a paper cup since I hadn't unpacked the kitchen boxes yet, when my phone buzzed with a text from Denise, Camille's mother. "Have you contacted Camille today? Something is taking place at the house." I hadn't interacted with Camille and had no immediate intention of doing so directly. Instead, all communications would be channeled through Priscilla. Yet, an irresistible sense of curiosity or perhaps predestination prompted me to reach out to Reggie instead. He informed me that they had executed the warrant earlier in the day, a fact evidenced by the background noise of activity, radio chatter, doors, and the distinct organized clamor typical of federal operations. Kowalski's office in Stafford, his residence, and an additional location discovered during surveillance were among the sites targeted. After a momentary silence, he added, "Your old address, Donovan?" It seemed that some of his business documents were stored on a laptop there. I remained seated in my largely unpacked rental, cradling a now-cold coffee cup as this revelation sunk in. On Thursday morning, Camille had permitted Trent to store his luggage in my home, smiling as she instructed me to depart. 48 hours later on Saturday morning, federal agents entered the same house, executing a search warrant linked to a multi-state wire fraud investigation. My former home was reportedly used by Trent Kowalski, my husband of 17 years, as a place to hide evidence he wished to keep hidden from his own office. Later that day, Reggie called again, providing more details once the situation had calmed down. As both a colleague and someone whose life became entangled in this, I was entitled to know the unclassified facts. Trent Kowalski's investment company allegedly defrauded at least 6 individuals across Virginia, Maryland, and North Carolina. This was done by providing false property appraisals to obtain disproportionately large loans compared to the property's actual worth, followed by defaulting on these loans and pocketing the excess funds through a series of shell LLCs. The total losses were estimated at approximately $2.3 million. In a house now searched by federal authorities, Camille, for the first time since their encounter at the property in Spotsylvania County, had to acknowledge that the self-assured, sun-kissed man she'd ended her marriage for wasn't the prosperous investor he claimed. In reality, as detailed in an arrest report read 3 days later, he was a con artist who'd been running the same scam for nearly 4 years, transitioning from one relationship to another, often targeting women with secure homes and trustworthy dispositions to cushion his schemes. Camille phoned me on Sunday night. I almost let it go to voicemail, but 17 years of matrimony doesn't dissipate instantly just because someone tells you to depart, and some deep-seated impulse led me to answer. She was genuinely crying, not pretending, and asked if I had known about it. I truthfully replied that I'd flagged Trent Kowalski's name to federal investigators a few weeks prior because his financial records surfaced during an unrelated professional review. At that point in time, I had no knowledge nor reason to suspect she was connected with him. I only confirmed the affair later, after his name was already under investigation. To clarify, my action wasn't motivated by his relationship with my wife. Instead, I followed protocol, reporting a suspected criminal to the relevant authorities. The coincidental link between these events wasn't orchestrated, it was discovered. Initially, Camille was skeptical of my explanation, and I could understand why. It's peculiar to learn that the man you publicly shamed in his own home was somehow secretly linked to the downfall of the person you left him for. However, as events unfolded over subsequent weeks with Trent's case unfolding against him and Camille being questioned by federal investigators, though she had no part in or knowledge of his fraud, merely serving as an unknowing facilitator for his evidence concealment, the reality of the situation became starkly clear to her. The house scenario eventually concluded swiftly, a speed that even Priscilla found surprising, who mentioned she seldom witnessed a divorce settlement progress so rapidly once both financial and legal aspects were clarified. Due to a potential federal investigation looming and the postnuptial agreement safeguarding the property equity, Camille consented to a settlement transferring the house entirely to me, alongside primary physical custody of Harper and Beckett. She retained her retirement funds and an equitable share of the remaining marital assets. This was not vindictive. I ensured it wasn't. Throughout my career, I've advocated for proportionality, ensuring actions have fitting consequences rather than emotional repercussions. I had no intention of financially ruining Camille out of anger. My primary goal was to secure stability for the children and keep their childhood home in their possession. Since that Thursday morning in the kitchen 6 months ago, time has passed. Trent Kowalski admitted guilt to lesser federal charges, trading cooperation against 2 allies who aided him in manipulating appraisals, and is currently serving a 4-year term at a North Carolina federal penitentiary. Camille relocated to a townhouse approximately 20 minutes from Harper and Beckett's school, providing convenient custody exchanges while ensuring minimal encounters, such as those at the grocery store. Our interactions have become civilized, more amicable than I initially thought possible. She disclosed her therapy sessions unprompted during a custody exchange a few months ago, implying she is sincere about attempting to comprehend her past actions. I returned to the house Camille instructed me to vacate. The same kitchen, the identical hallway where Trent strolled with his duffel bag, as if it belonged to him. Harper resumed occupying her old room. Beckett reconstructed his computer setup on the same desk. Occasionally, I find myself back in that kitchen brewing coffee, reminiscing about when Camille revealed our divorce wasn't necessary, making me ponder if she had been correct. Not because she would have gotten away with anything, but because for roughly 2 days, she truly believed she had triumphed. Friends and colleagues occasionally query whether I harbor regrets for not challenging her upon discovery, wishing perhaps I had shouted or thrown objects, as one might anticipate from a wronged husband. I don't. 17 years in federal service taught me that those who ultimately lose are often the ones who acted hastily and considered afterward. Camille acted first. She smiled in that kitchen because she thought she grasped the entire situation, but she was mistaken. She believed she was dissolving a marriage with a mid-level logistics consultant who would comply quietly. She instructed a federal agent to vacate his residence, which was later the same day as his colleagues executed a search warrant at her new boyfriend's house. I often ponder on Reggie's words that Trent would be indicted regardless of me. His statement holds truth, and I cling to it because I refuse to be a man who employs his badge as a weapon within a marital relationship. I didn't need to, for the truth was self-executing. It always eventually reveals itself if one is patient enough to allow it. Harper inquired about my happiness during a car ride to a volleyball tournament a few weeks ago, a question 15-year-olds ask when attempting to gauge the well-being of adults, or whether they are merely pretending for the child's sake. I told her the truth, as I have with most matters since that Thursday morning. I conveyed to her that true joy hadn't fully set in yet, as I was still grappling with the concept of rebuilding a life at 46, following 17 years. However, I assured her I was resilient, strong. I clarified that resilience is often the foundation upon which happiness is constructed, given enough time. Camille never sent those divorce documents. In the end, she didn't have to. I filed them myself 3 days after that Thursday morning through Priscilla Vance in a calm and efficient manner, as I've handled every challenge in my professional life. She said no papers were needed, standing in my kitchen with a smile. She was almost correct. She didn't anticipate how swiftly the ground beneath her would change, or how minimal control she actually held over an ending she believed she had already scripted. It's striking to me, whenever I craft these tales, that the most composed individual often seems to be 3 steps ahead. Winning isn't about shouting louder or exerting greater force. It's about being patient, observant, and allowing truth to prevail. Many of us could benefit from remembering this. In many situations, the wisest course of action might be remaining silent and allowing events to unfold naturally. Here are my thoughts. Feel free to share yours in the comments below. Were you like Donovan, choosing quietude in a tense moment? If you're new here, consider subscribing, as I have more stories similar to this one lined up for you.